Most people assume that after a demon is cast out, the victim is left permanently broken. But many historical accounts suggest something far stranger. After hours of violent strain, the moment the entity leaves, the body experiences an overwhelming wave of relief. The pressure disappears, the nervous system finally releases, and the exhausted host often falls into the deepest sleep of their life as the body begins to recover. But that raises two disturbing questions. How does a human body survive a complete spiritual takeover? And what methods did ancient exorcists believe could reclaim a hijacked soul? Welcome back to part 2 of The Silent Infection. Today we examine the final stages of possession and the mechanics of the eviction. To understand how a demonic eviction works, you first have to understand the terrifying moment when a quiet, invisible infection transitions into a full system override. During the earliest stages of spiritual compromise, the entity works in absolute secrecy. It behaves like a silent background program, quietly mapping the host's psychological weaknesses. It studies their deepest fears, their unresolved childhood trauma, their hidden guilt, slowly weaving itself into the host's thoughts. But once that internal security audit is complete, the entity no longer needs to hide. It initiates a complete hijack of the host's consciousness and physical motor functions. When this system override begins, the host often experiences a deeply disturbing phenomenon known as missing time. Hours, sometimes even days, simply disappear. A person may black out while sitting in their living room, only to wake up hours later in an unfamiliar place with absolutely no memory of how they got there. And when those brief moments of clarity return, a horrifying realization begins to settle in. Someone or something had control of their body while their own conscious mind was locked away in complete silence. Once a case reaches this point, classical demonology and many historical investigators do not rely on guesswork. They apply a structured diagnostic framework designed to distinguish an alleged spiritual event from medical, neurological, or psychiatric conditions. Historically, this framework centers around 4 specific signs. The first is glossolalia, often called the unearned tongue. This refers to the sudden ability to speak, read, or fully understand languages the individual has never studied, never heard, and never learned. One of the most famous examples comes from the 1949 case of Roland Doe, the 13-year-old boy whose story later inspired The Exorcist. According to the records kept by the Jesuit priests, Roland would enter deep trance-like states, his voice would change, and he would begin speaking fluent Latin. Not merely repeating religious phrases, but holding conversations, using proper grammar, sentence structure, and vocabulary, despite never having studied the language. Other historical accounts describe individuals writing backwards in ancient Aramaic or speaking long-forgotten Greek dialects far beyond what their education could explain. The second sign is facultas, or superhuman kinetic output. Under normal circumstances, the human brain limits muscular strength to prevent tendons from tearing or bones from breaking. But during an alleged system override, those biological limiters appear to disappear. Again, the Roland Doe case provides one of the best-known examples. Witnesses reported that a 13-year-old boy required up to 5 grown men to restrain him. During one session, he reportedly snapped a heavy leather restraint, freed one arm, and struck Father Walter Halloran with enough force to break the priest's nose. Other historical reports describe frail individuals lifting furniture, throwing adults across rooms, or maintaining impossible body positions for long periods without showing signs of fatigue. The third sign is occulta, the cognitive breach. This is when the alleged entity begins revealing deeply private information about the priest, the assistants, or even observers in the room. Information the host should have no possible way of knowing. The purpose is not entertainment. It is psychological warfare. The entity attempts to weaken everyone present, by exposing hidden sins, private conversations, family secrets, or deeply personal memories. Anything that might undermine confidence and spiritual authority. The fourth and final sign is aversio, an extreme, violent reaction to sacred objects, consecrated materials, or specific religious prayers. During this stage, the host may recoil violently, as though physically burned by holy water. Sacred relics, or prayers, even when those objects remain completely hidden from the host's sight. When these four signs appear together, the situation, according to classical demonology, moves beyond diagnosis and into what is described as an active spiritual conflict. But even then, the eviction itself is not simply a matter of shouting prayers. It is viewed as a dangerous, highly structured, legal confrontation. Once the diagnostic signs have been verified and the physical reality of the possession is no longer in doubt, the entire room begins to change. The atmosphere shifts almost instantly. The air grows unnaturally cold. Not the ordinary chill of an open window, but a heavy, biting cold that seems to settle deep into the bones. The pressure in the room feels different. Every breath becomes visible as white mist, hanging in the air for just a moment before disappearing into the silence. This is no longer simply a room where examinations are taking place. It has become a battlefield. And in this battle, the greatest weapon is not physical force. It is language. Although the possessed person may normally speak English, or whatever language they learned growing up, many experienced exorcists have reported that the entities speaking through them often shift into completely different languages during the rite. Across centuries of Catholic exorcisms, Latin has remained the language most closely associated with these confrontations. It is an ancient, rigid language, a language that has remained almost unchanged for centuries. Within the Roman Catholic tradition, it became the language of authority, of solemn decree, and of the official rite itself. Many exorcists have claimed that the atmosphere changes the moment the prayers switch from everyday speech into ecclesiastical Latin. The mockery often turns into rage. The laughter disappears. What replaces it is something far more disturbing. Some historical accounts even describe entities speaking languages that the possessed person had never studied, sometimes ancient languages that baffled everyone present. Whether these accounts can all be verified remains debated, but they have become part of exorcism history for centuries. The confrontation officially begins when the priest places a purple stole around his neck. The stole is not merely a piece of clothing. It represents the authority. In one hand rests a crucifix. The spiritual siege has begun. The priest does not simply read prayers, he repeats them. And again and again. He begins with the Paternoster, the Lord's Prayer, then the Ave Maria, the Hail Mary. Each prayer is spoken slowly, deliberately, and in solemn Latin. To an outside observer, they may sound almost peaceful, but according to many experienced exorcists, the entity reacts very differently. With every repetition, the resistance becomes more violent. The possessed person's body may begin thrashing across the bed with frightening strength. Their back may arch violently. Their muscles tighten until every tendon seems ready to tear. The voice changes. Sometimes it becomes unnaturally deep, sometimes unnaturally high. Sometimes witnesses have described hearing what sounded like multiple voices speaking together in perfect, disturbing unison. The entity screams, it hisses, it laughs, it curses. It does everything it can to break the concentration of the priest. Many exorcists have reported another disturbing tactic. The entity may suddenly begin speaking in the voice of someone the possessed person once loved, a deceased parent, a sibling, a friend. The voice cries for help, begs for mercy, pleads for the ritual to stop. But the priest has been trained to recognize deception. He cannot allow emotion to interrupt the rites forward. The prayers grow stronger. The priest now begins reciting passages from the Rituale Romanum, the formal Roman rite of exorcism that guided Catholic exorcists for centuries. Then comes one of its most direct commands. Exorcizo te, omnis spiritus immunde. I exorcise you, every unclean spirit. According to numerous exorcists, is often the point where the confrontation becomes intensely personal. The entity changes its strategy. Rather than attacking physically, it attacks psychologically. Its goal is simple: divide the room, destroy confidence, create fear. Many experienced exorcists have claimed that the entity will suddenly focus on the weakest person present. Its eyes lock onto them. Then, in a low, mocking voice, it begins revealing deeply personal information. Hidden failures, private sins, embarrassing memories. Things that, according to those present, whether one accepts these testimonies or not, reports like these appear repeatedly throughout the history of documented exorcisms. The purpose is always the same: to intimidate, to break the resolve of everyone involved. The priest cannot respond, neither can the assistants. Every emotion becomes another opportunity for manipulation. The room must remain silent, focused, united. But the struggle is not only spiritual, it can also become strangely physical. Some deliverance ministers and Catholic exorcists have long believed that certain occult objects can complicate a case. A cursed talisman, an object used in ritual practices, a family heirloom connected to occult activity. Some accounts even describe extreme cases in which the possessed person had unknowingly swallowed small ritual objects before the alleged possession began. According to these traditions, until those objects are found and destroyed, often by burning them or casting them into running water, the entity may continue resisting the rite. Whether every case follows this pattern remains debated, but the belief has appeared in exorcism accounts for generations. If the priest remains focused, if every distraction fails, if every prayer continues without interruption, the battle reaches its climax. The priest demands only one thing: Dic mihi nomen tuum. Tell me your name. Many exorcists believe that forcing the entity to reveal its name weakens its resistance and strips away part of its ability to deceive. The response is often violent. The possessed person may scream, convulse, claw at their own throat. Some witnesses describe vomiting, others describe desperate attempts to cover the mouth or refuse to speak. The struggle becomes exhausting, but eventually, according to many exorcists, the silence breaks, the name is spoken, and with the name revealed, the priest delivers the final command. Speaking directly to the entity, he invokes the authority of Christ and orders it to depart forever. The room falls silent. One final violent shudder passes through the body. Then, nothing. Hours of overwhelming muscle tension suddenly disappear. The body, completely exhausted, collapses into a deep, peaceful sleep. If the rite has been successful, the battle is over. The room that had become a battlefield only moments before slowly returns to silence. But for everyone who witnessed it, the memory of what happened inside those walls rarely leaves them. The human body is a sacred vessel. And as we've seen throughout this investigation, reclaiming that vessel after it has been breached is anything but simple. It is a long, exhausting battle fought through ancient rituals, sacred prayers, unwavering faith, and relentless psychological warfare. If the accounts are to be believed, possession represents one of the greatest violations imaginable. Not simply an attack on the body, but an attempt to seize control of the soul itself. But that raises an even darker question. What happens when the door isn't forced open? What happens when someone opens it willingly? In our next video, we're leaving behind the battlefield of demonic possession and stepping into something far more deliberate. The ancient and highly controversial practice of demonic summoning. Many people assume possession and summoning are the same thing. They are not. Possession is described as a hostile invasion. Summoning is an invitation. One is forced, the other is intentional. Together, we'll explore the ancient rituals that were believed to call these entities, the forgotten languages that occult traditions claimed they recognized, the symbols, names, and invocations used throughout history, and why so many cultures warned that once something answers, sending it back may be far more difficult than calling it in the first place. If that sounds like a journey worth taking, make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, and join us for our next deep dive into one of history's darkest and most mysterious subjects. Until then, thank you for watching, and as always, stay vigilant.